You guys, welcome back to RevU. We're glad to have you. Let's give it up one more time for Daniel and Dave and their amazing top talent training. And one more time for Central Bank, because we are very grateful to have them on board. Okay, with us today, we have Randy Hales. He is a serial CEO and has specialized in increasing enterprise value through outstanding teams focused on key value drivers. He's played a part in the success of several large-scale companies, including his most recent venture, Zag. You may also recognize him from Utah Business Magazine, where he was named CEO of the Year in 2018. So let's give it up for Randy Hales. We're going to put you down on the couch.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Thank you for the introduction.
Sure.
Okay, I have to tell you something.
Okay.
We're recent empty nesters in our home, and so I said to my wife today, I said, hey, how would you feel about going to St. George for the weekend? She said, that sounds terrific. I go, let's go. We're going to make a little stop in Provo at a place called Rev Road. So I kind of tricked her into this. I'd like to invite her to come up here and join me if you're okay with it. Come on. Come.
Yes.
I have to tell them the way. Yeah, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. When we're at social events, I love, when you're meeting new people and engaging that way, I love to always say this, Bree. This is my line. I'm like, oh, we're the Hales, and between the two of us, we have 5 college degrees, and one of them is mine. Lisa just finished her MBA in May. It's her 3rd master's degree. She knows a whole lot more about this than I do, so keep me honest here as we go.
Okay. Amazing.
Okay.
Well, we are so thrilled to have both of you now.
Thank you.
This is a surprise for everyone. We're very excited. Let's kick things off with just kind of some basics. Everyone always asks the challenges, obstacles you have to overcome. What were those like, and what advice would you give to our fellow entrepreneurs?
I'm going to do a quick shout out to Dave and Daniel. That was fantastic. Everything starts with your team. That is number one, first and foremost, most important. You can't do anything until you have the right team. So getting the right team in place, establishing the right culture, and then, I like to talk about, and I think I may have sent you a slide, the purpose and profit motive slide.
Yes.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. You can't establish any of that until you have the right people on board.
Right.
By the way, I have to warn Bree. So Bree and I have, she asked me some questions. I gave some answers. I've been interviewed by Jim Cramer a couple times. You guys know who Jim Cramer is? Mad Money. You watch him. He's kind of crazy, right? So he always does the same thing. He says, here's the questions I'm going to ask you. Tell me what you're going to say. You get in on set. The lights go on. And he doesn't ask me any of the questions. So I'm going to turn the table a little today, Bree.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer any of your questions.
I'm with it. Let's switch it up. Let's switch it up. Take it away. All you.
Anyway, that's it. Ask another question. Let's see how I do.
Okay, perfect. So with those obstacles and challenges, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are just now starting out that are going to face some of the similar ones that you also went through?
Well, again, I think I'd go back to how do you hire the right people and people that'll fit into your culture. We meet a lot of great people in life, and I have a lot of friends, but I wouldn't invite them to my workplace because culturally we're not going to be totally aligned. So I think that hiring decision is critical. You also have to know where you're going, how you're going to get there, why are you in this business? I don't think businesses exist to make money. I really don't. Now, we need to, right? If you don't make money, you're not going to be in business very long. Businesses are really established to make the world a little better. How are we going to leave humanity better than when we got here kind of thing?
Sure.
And the business side of, if the business has that focus, and I'm going to pick on Daniel a little bit. I didn't know there were such tools as he described today, these hiring tools. Does that make the world a little better? Well, I don't know. It maybe attracts the right talent so that the business can perform well, and you start to create a cycle. If you're about making the world a little bit better, you've got to have money to do it, right? So the business has to be viable. You have to know where you're going, how you're going to get there. But that, I call it the profit motive. The profit motive funds the purpose motive. The purpose motive, in turn, guides the profit motive, and you get this really wonderful synergistic loop going. And we'll show that slide in a minute.
Yes.
I keep jumping ahead, sorry.
You're doing great.
Okay.
You're doing great. I can tell there's a lot of passion behind it. I'm just like you, talking with my hands, and I love it because I think it demonstrates passion. So where did this passion for business and entrepreneurship come from? Was it always a passion? Were you born with it? Did you learn it later on?
Using the term entrepreneur with me is not fair. These are entrepreneurs. I'm not an entrepreneur, okay? I've never started anything from scratch. I'm kind of a second gen kind of guy. I come in when the business is, the business concept's been proven out, and then I'll take it forward. Now, you might say because of the size of the companies that's still entrepreneurial. When I first started at Zag, I think we did about $39 million that year.
Okay.
So it was relatively small in the space. So I've got a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit, I'd like to believe, but I've never done what you guys are doing, which is starting from the ground up. I'm an engineering major. I got a degree in construction management from BYU. Wow. Thought that I would get into real estate development, and when I teach a couple of courses at different universities, and the students always say, what's the number one thing you would recommend? Well, you guys are probably a little too old to be students, but maybe some of you are still working in businesses, and the concept applies. Get an internship, and then be a lifelong learner. And then when you're in the workforce, volunteer for things. I'll tell you a funny story.
Yes.
Working at so I finished my construction management degree, went to Houston, Texas, worked for a very large real estate development company. And after 3 or 4 years, I became the director of operations. I really understood that business pretty well. Well, the owner came into my office one day, and he said, hey, Randy, I'm going to take my company public. Would you like to be on the IPO team? And I looked at him, I said, David, I'm honored that you'd ask. Of course, I'd love to be on the IPO team. He walked out of my office. I got up, I closed the door. I called my buddy who's getting an MBA at Harvard, and I said, what in the hell is an IPO? I had no idea. In construction management, we did not cover that course on taking companies public. And the reason I tell you that story, Bree, is to say you should always have your hand up. I tell you another interesting thing I've noticed in business. You'll go into a meeting, you'll be sitting around a conference room table, right? And somebody will come in from senior management or senior executives, and they'll say, we've got a new project we're undertaking, and we need volunteers. And you know what happens in that moment? Everybody gets a text at the same time. All the phones come out, and everybody looks down. Because we're like, I have too much on my plate already. I couldn't take on another assignment. I couldn't possibly.
Right.
I tell the young people that are in these classes, raise your hand. Take the assignment. Yeah. Who knows what you're going to learn, and who knows what path it'll set you on. But saying yes to working on that IPO caused my entire career to pivot. And I went from having dreams of being a real estate developer to dreaming about running, building, and developing people and companies.
Sure. So. And were you two married at the time of this IPO?
No.
No?
No, otherwise I would have called her.
Okay. And she probably would have known, yes. I love it. Well, as far as partnerships go, you come in later than the early, ground level entrepreneurship, yes?
Yeah.
So when you come in, how important are partnerships still in everything that you do?
Oh my gosh, partnerships are everything, especially in early stage companies.
Okay.
Because you don't have these big advertising budgets, right? You're not going to go spend a ton of money telling the world about yourself. You can leverage social, you can do those kind of things that are within reach, but partnerships can move you to the next level. I bought a company a couple of years ago called Mophie. Do any of you know what Mophie is? Any of you have a Mophie product with you today, a Mophie battery case? Boy, I'm going to put that story on the side for a minute because it's one I should probably tell. But Mophie, what's a Mophie? Nobody knows what a Mophie is. It's a made-up word. Right. And when they were very, very small, they went to Apple and convinced Apple that they could make an iPhone perform a little better than it does on their own. That's no small task because Apple isn't really open to suggestions. Okay, and Apple bought into what they were selling, put Mophie on the shelf, and Mophie went from just a made-up name to the most valuable brand asset in all of mobile computing. It's number one. Can I tell a funny Mophie story?
As many stories as you want.
Okay, this one?
And if you have any, Lisa, any embarrassing ones, other ones,
throw
them in.
She lived through all of this. So actually,
yes.
I'm going to ask Lisa to sit down now. I don't want her to Correct. No. So when I was running Zag, we had a great admiration for Mophie because they totally embraced Apple, and Apple put them in their stores worldwide, and it really elevated the brand to something special. But we knew Mophie was in trouble. The bankers would call and say the company's going up for sale, and as we dug into it a little bit more, we found out that they were actually going to go through a foreclosure process. They were essentially bankrupt. So we're looking at this business saying they've got the best brand in our industry, a killer product, great distribution. They were broken operationally. And so I went to my board and I said, I want to buy Mophie, and it's going to cost $100 million. And the board said, well, they're bankrupt. Why don't we just wait till the banks foreclose and we can swoop in and buy whatever assets are left. The problem with that in retail is what? What happens when a company goes bankrupt? What do the retailers do? Yeah, those products evaporate. And good luck getting back on shelf. Is Apple going to take the risk of putting a company that just went through a bankruptcy back on the shelf? Probably not. So they said, well, why $100 million? And I said, well, I'm going to tell you the board answer, and then I'm going to tell you the street answer. The board answer is because they have $98 million in debt between their suppliers and work in progress and their bank debt and all these things. And then I wanted to give each of the two founders $1 million. So I go, $100 million. So when we went to the street, and I told my board, I said, Wall Street's going to throw up on this deal. They're going to hate it. But our stock was so depressed at the time that it couldn't go any further if we did really dumb things. So I'm like, let's do something really dumb and then see where it goes.
Great strategy.
So we go to the world and we paid $100 million. We think of forward EBITDA is $20 million a year. So we paid a 5 times EBITDA, forward EBITDA. And the street went, wait, what? The street said, worst acquisition of the year. Absolute worst acquisition on Wall Street in 2015 or 16, whenever it was. Well, I mentioned, I'm kind of getting to another point in the narrative here. I mentioned we valued them on 3 things: brand strength or reputation, distribution, and their products. But we knew that operationally they were broken. We fixed the operations very quickly, and we went from first year that we had them, they did $100 million in revenue, and we lost $30 million. Second year that we owned them, they did $240 million in revenue, and it's a public company, so I can't disclose because we've never have, but the cash flow that was generated from that was unbelievable. And so the second year, Wall Street was like, best acquisition of the year. These guys are geniuses. So I told my exec team, I go, well, if you take 2015 and 2016 on balance, it just proves that average people can do acquisitions and make it work. So
Average people. Yeah. Well, I'm definitely average, so maybe I've got some luck.
It's not that hard.
Perfect. So as far as stress goes, with all business, there's stress involved, especially when you're running your own. So what is the best way to deal with that kind of stress?
Do you have a slide for me?
I do have a slide for you.
I showed Bree this slide. Oh, there we go. I showed Bree this slide when we were together a couple months ago. Do you have a problem? There's supposed to be another arrow from underneath that goes to no. So let's say, do you have a problem? No, then don't worry. Do you have a problem? Yes. Okay. Can you do anything about it? Yes. Then don't worry. No. Then don't worry. Like, just don't worry about it, guys. I worked with a really good executive years ago, and he told me, after we had done something pretty wonderful in the business, he said, yeah, don't get too caught up in that. And I said, why? And he goes, things are never as good as they seem, and they're never as bad as they seem. Just kind of ride the wave. Just stay constant about it. Look, the things you can control them. The things you can't control, don't worry about them. Just don't lose any sleep over it. It's easier said than done, but if you can get into that routine and habit, everything's better, especially your family life, right? There. See, she validated it.
He does live this.
He lives it.
Does.
Yeah. Amazing. So when you went on and you started working with Zag, yes, what were some of the key things that you saw that needed to be implemented and changed a little bit to make Zag work?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying Zag was an all-you-can-eat buffet of problems. I can't think of one thing that was actually working right.
Yeah.
It was really a mess, because what happens in businesses, by that point in time, I'd mentioned the company had grown to about $39 million in revenue. Still in its very early stages, but starting to generate some cash. If you don't define culture up front, culture will define itself, and you're not going to like the answer. And so here we had a whole lot of people, most of whom were good people, great people, hardworking people, but they were neighbors, home teachers. I can say that more in Utah County. Family, friends, but they'd never come together to run a business, or they didn't have the skill sets to run the business. So I had a very good group of people in the wrong roles. So we first had to sort that out. And then we had to say, okay, well, why are we here? What's our culture? What do we look like? You know, what's our mission, vision, value, guiding principles, those things that really give purpose and meaning to the business. Why do we exist? And then on the other side, we had to work on the profit motive and really hone what we were trying to do to make sure that we could become a going concern. I'll tell you an interesting thing when I first got there. 95% of our revenue came from one product, and 95% of that revenue came from one customer. Concentration, concentration, concentration. So you could look out ahead and see, oh my gosh, I need more customers and I need more products to diversify the business to where it could be a going concern. So it wasn't like rocket science to figure out what we needed to do, but there was a lot of heavy lifting to start putting the building blocks in place and kind of restart the business. Right. If you are in a startup environment today, and maybe there's one of you or two of you or 10 of you, establish your culture. Establish your culture, because that becomes a huge filter for who you're going to bring in and how they're going to perform on the team ultimately. So really work on that.
I love what you said where you mentioned moving people around and getting them into the positions they needed to be in.
Yeah.
Because where you place your people is so crucial. And that affects the culture so much.
Okay. I'm going to give you a little Halesism on that, okay? So I've never gone into a business where I've fired people. I don't believe in it. If people are in a role, when you go into a business, I've always assumed they're there for a reason. They've earned the right to be in that job. Now, we may have to fine-tune that, but what typically happens is nobody ever defines success for them. And I'll tell you something that every single employee deserves, has a right to have. Every month, they should have a one-on-one. If you're not having one-on-ones, if you're a manager and you have employees reporting to you, and you don't have a formal one-on-one every single month, you're doing yourself and that employee a disservice. And let me explain why. In corporate America forever, we said, let's do a semi-annual review, or let's do an annual review. How many of you have been through those? What really gets discussed in those reviews? Of about 10 days ago. 10 days back is about as far as we go, maybe 2 weeks. And so if you want to ace those, if you're in a company that does those today, just be really awesome for 2 weeks before your review and you'll be fine.
You'll be good.
Yeah. I really think that type of communication is a crutch for poor communication. So we actually tied our manager's compensation to a monthly one-on-one. If you didn't have a monthly one-on-one with your direct reports, you weren't eligible for the incentive compensation. Here's the reason. Let's assume this is you and your employee. You come together each month, and it can't be, let's go to Starbucks. It's, let's sit down and let's talk about things. You come together, and everybody's perfectly aligned. You know, you've got unity. This is where we're going. Life is good. A month goes by, and what happens? Every month, tick, just off just a little, one way or the other, right? Well, at a 1 month interval, you can come back together. Sometimes it's the manager that needs to come back together. Or get back in line, but you can come back in line and nobody minds a course correction. A course correction's a very easy, comfortable thing. When you allow 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months to go by, and then you sit down in a one-on-one and you try to move somebody back, you know what they're thinking in their mind? My manager's a jerk. Yeah. This company sucks. I don't want to be here. I'm not, I've been doing this for 5 months and now they tell me I have to do this. And what do you think the manager's thinking? The manager's saying, wow, this employee's terrible. We talked about it 5 months ago. Why are they over here now? Right. Well, guys, actually the same thing works in your marriage too, by the way. You ought to come together once a month and have a good talk.
You guys do some one-on-ones, some great discussions.
She leads those.
She should, yes.
It's her course correcting me.
I love that. And I'd imagine in these one-on-ones and these course corrections meetings, lots of mentorship happens on both sides.
Tons of mentorship.
How important is mentorship?
Huge, 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 huge. In fact, I think there's something really unique happening in the world today. I was very fortunate early in my career to have some unbelievable mentors. People that you would know. If I said their names, you'd go, oh my gosh, really fortunate that way. That seems to be harder and harder to find, but seek somebody in the organization that's willing to be a mentor to you. It doesn't have to be a formal reporting relationship. It doesn't have to be a vertical relationship. It can be a horizontal relationship, but find people that are doing things well and succeeding and get to know them better and find out why they're succeeding. But the other thing I would tell you, use technology. This is what's available to you that wasn't available to me early in my career, social media. Mm-hmm. How many of you follow Gary Vaynerchuk? Am I saying it right? I love the guy. Put a PG-13 filter on and listen to him all day long, okay?
Yes.
He's passionate. He's terrific. His philosophies are great. You can go out in social media today and find people who are doing jobs that you want to ultimately do or emulate or having successes that you'd like to participate in. And they're great mentors. So there's mentors, I think, all over the place.
Mentors everywhere, yeah. So what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs as a mentor on spending money?
Don't do it. Seriously, seriously, don't do it. Do everything you can to conserve every dime that you have. Let's go back a little bit to, so how do I move my business forward? Find partnerships that are meaningful, that lift you, lift your brand, embrace them, and leverage those. But spend as little money as you can. You can't afford to hire poor talent. You have to make sure you hire the best and then pay for it. I totally agree with that. Don't be afraid to compensate. Our philosophy at ZAG was we'd look at a market, and if there was a job that the market says is worth $100,000, well, let's use 90. It's easier math. It says it's worth 90,000. We're going to pay 100, and then we're going to put another 30% on top of that in variable income that the employee controls. Not me, not the manager. The employee controls that. Put people in control of their compensation and pay them more than they're worth. If any of you are Dan Pink fans, Dan Pink put out a video years ago called "The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us." Some of you have seen that. The first 5 minutes of it, he talks all about compensation philosophy. And he says, pay people enough that they come through your door and they're not thinking about compensation. And then you can get to the things that really matter, which he argues are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Great video. Go Google it when you have a minute today, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us.
I love that. I love that. We always get a lot of questions and concerns about the home-life balance, yes? You obviously have an impressive resume, and we know you definitely do as well. So what does the home-life balance or the home-work balance look like for you with both of you being such driven individuals?
Take it, all yours.
Retirement.
Yeah, that's really true.
Trips to St. George, yes.
Yeah. Lisa retired 3 years ago and invited me to catch up. I caught up a year and a half ago. So.
I love it.
But I'll tell you the truth of it. I felt like in our relationship, I had to compartmentalize. And, there were times where work would take priority. It just had to. And maybe my family would suffer a little bit because I wasn't around as much. I was traveling, whatever, spending too many hours at the office. And then I'd try to rotate that. I wouldn't let that state exist for very long. And then I'd flip those.
Right.
And I think it's a balancing act like that. I think you never find that perfect harmony, but you can balance with a little effort.
Right. It's about staying aware and in tune of where you are in that balance and making sure both sides are compensated.
We totally figured it out. We have no idea where our children are today, but we totally figured the
Love it.
life balance
out. Perfect. Well, what are you guys passionate about outside of work since you are retired?
Oh, you go first.
A lot of play. A lot of travel, continuous learning, and giving back to the community. And really, we're both passionate about education. I was an educator, and we believe that, you can solve a lot of problems if you support education. So we fund a lot of scholarships and volunteer our time with universities and Make-A-Wish and that kind of thing.
That's beautiful.
Okay, she says play. And we do. We play, but I decided, I got this wild idea. I wanted to ride my bicycle across the country in March. So we left at the end of March. We went from San Diego to St. Augustine, Florida. It took about 6 weeks. And Lisa was driving the support vehicle. And so
Same.
you would think
That would've
she'd
been me.
just enjoy the scenery, right? No, she learned to speak French. So she doesn't rest very much.
I love that. I love that. We are going to open it up for some audience questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll have some mics run over to you.
Hey, Bree, and before we do,
Sure.
just one question. Do you have the slide that shows let's go past that one. Nope, never mind. Okay. I'll send it to you as follow-up. There's another slide that I was thinking I had sent down, but I probably didn't. So,
Okay, send it to me. We can send it out.
okay.
Yep.
All right.
Sure thing.
Okay.
Questions, feelings, thoughts. Yeah,
You realize we're between them and lunch right now, right?
I know.
All
They're
right.
like, no questions.
So this is a question for both of you. What role has Lisa, correct? Is that your name? What role have you played in his businesses? Have you just kind of been a support at home, or have you actually, worked within them? And how has that dynamic been?
A lot of it's support at home, and then I had mentioned Make-A-Wish. Part of, so ZAG took on Make-A-Wish as their philanthropic endeavor that was embraced by the community because it fit with their values. One of their core values was care for people. So in order to live that, they partnered with Make-A-Wish, and so I sit on the Make-A-Wish Utah board, and that actually came after working with ZAG. And so once a month at ZAG, they would draw 10 employees' names, and Make-A-Wish would give them a wish kit, and we would plan a wish reveal party for this child, and so I would go in and help out with that. But I was a worker bee, I wasn't in charge, but it was just a way for me to get to know all the employees and see what he does, spend a little more time with him when I could, and so yeah, that was, but a lot of it is supportive, and I was an English teacher, so I'm a pretty good editor, and
Oh, yeah.
I'm the copy editor, and not that he needs it, but I'm the last glance at things, and but really get to know the people that he worked with.
That's awesome.
Perfect. We'll go AJ.
Randy, it's so good to have you here today, and Lisa as well. And your career has been phenomenal. We're all really impressed with that. If you had to go back and do it over again, is there anything you would do differently?
I would start with education. I'd go back and get an MBA. I've often said I got an MBA at the School of Hard Knocks, but boy, that formal education would have been very beneficial in the roles that I ended up filling during my career. I think we'd always go back and do things a little bit differently. This slide shows a formula on the board. I probably should explain what it is real quickly. But it took me years and years and years to figure this formula out. And the slide that I'll send down later, it shows, visually, it depicts the perfect balanced organization between the profit motive and the purpose motive. I don't talk too much about the purpose motive because I think that's for each one of you to define. Each organization is different, and your priorities are different, and your motivations are different. So I kind of leave that on one side. If you go over to the profit motive, something that I learned in time, and this was looking at hundreds of companies, I found that there were 4 things that if companies did well, they always overperformed or outperformed the market. If they did 2 things on these A, B, C, D, if they did 2 of them well, I usually knew we were going to lose our investment if we couldn't move that. If they did 3 of them well, they performed about average. But again, if they did all 4 of these things well, they overperformed, and it ended up being a really great venture for us. They're super silly simple. You guys ready for this?
Yes.
Here's the formula. This is like E = MC squared, only you're going to be able to understand it, okay? Here we go.
Okay.
Number 1, most important, is that you have a product or service that people want. Sounds so basic, doesn't it? But how many companies have you seen that put a product out there and then they just ride the wave? They're not continuing to stay ahead of what the consumer's interests are and their needs and how they can continue to expand that product experience with the consumers. So you have to have a product or service that people want. Number 2, you need to have today. I used to talk about brand. Brand doesn't mean as much as it used to. And in fact, reputation is far more important than brand. What do you do when you go to shop for something today? You go online and you read the reviews, right? And sometimes if you're like me and I'm in a hurry, I'm like, oh, it's 4.7, okay, I'm buying, and I don't even care what the brand is.
Yeah.
Brand only comes into play after they've validated your reputation. So if you have two reputations, they're both 4.7, then I might look to brand. But, so product's number one, having a great brand and reputation's number two. The third one seems so simple, but it's distribution, making sure that your products or services are offered and available where the consumer you're going after wants to get those.
Sure.
Right place, right time, it drives sales. And the fourth one is operational excellence. So remember the Mophie story. When we evaluated acquisitions, we evaluated against, I call them the 4 levers you can influence every day to drive enterprise value. We valued them or evaluated them against that. They had great product, great brand, great distribution, really poor on operational excellence. We knew we could pay what looked like a premium, fix that 4th lever, and have a real wonderful business there.
Okay.
So if I go back to the equation again for just a minute, you're in charge of culture, everyone's different, but over on the profit motive, I've really found over the years, those are the only 4 things you should focus on. And it's just a Halesism, but if you were focusing in our organizations on anything that didn't relate back to one of those 4 levers, it was a nice to do. Everything that supported those were must do's. Remember when I talked about 30% of people's income and they self-direct it? It was tied to those 4 levers. So we'd say, I say individual, that's probably not fair. We never compensated individuals, we compensated teams. So if I'm on the marketing team, I could have 3 or 4 goals, but they had to support one or all of those 4 levers. And I didn't even care what the bar was, how they performed. If they hit their goals, we'd pay out that additional compensation.
Okay.
I could tell you 100 stories on the difference it made. I'm going to give you one quick example.
Sure.
Apple. When Steve Jobs came back to Apple, horrible product. Well, okay product, but it was niche-y, and you'd have to be an educator or a graphic designer to have a Mac, right? But it wasn't a product for the masses. So what do? They introduced the iPod. It led to the iPhone, to the iPad. The MacBooks got launched and revamped, and anyway, they started with product. Their brand meant nothing to the mass consumer again. It was a brand that some people might know, most people didn't. It's the most valuable brand asset in the world today. The brand alone is worth billions and billions of dollars. They focused on product, built the brand and the reputation, couldn't get distribution. Best Buy wouldn't take their products on. He went, I'll open my own stores. He figured out the distribution model. Now Best Buy is saying, we'll give you free floor space. Just put your products on our floor.
Right.
About the only place you can't get an Apple product today is probably the International Space Station. You can get them. They've figured out distribution and then operational excellence. That's where Tim Cook really took the business to the next level. It's the same 4 levers. I could give you sporting teams where you'd go, oh my gosh, yes, they followed the same format. I could give you a nonprofit example. I could give you a service industry example. It's really that simple. Those 4 levers move business.
Okay. Thank you. One more question?
Randy, I have a kind of a random question for you. I'm wondering if you do any kind of impersonations, I don't know, of, say, a former Secretary of State, for example?
Nope, not anymore. I can do one. See if you know who this is. I don't know if I can do it unless I sit up. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I'm going to close conference now. No? Oh, yeah, no, that was a pretty good President Hinckley, but all right. Thank you for asking.
Beautiful.
So I have a question what you were talking about before, about finding partners and partnerships that really match your company in order to kind of help you grow. And can you explain a little bit more, give some examples of what that looks like? I can't quite wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I'll go back to the Mophie one for just a moment. The startup company didn't have the money to go out and tell the world their story or about their products, but they convinced Apple, this wonderful brand and with great distribution, to carry their products. And there was an automatic endorsement with that, where the consumer walking into an Apple store would see a Mophie product on shelf and say, Well, they must be great because Apple says they're good enough to have in store here. And it had the net effect of creating a lot of momentum behind the brand. All of a sudden, they were getting editorial coverage. You know, who's this Mophie company? Mophie was one of the first brands outside of Apple to be inside of that store. So it was just a fantastic partnership and relationship. I had another business where we did the same thing. We leveraged Target. Target sells more small corded kitchen countertop appliances than any other retailer in the world, including Walmart. And we were able to put our products on shelf at Target, and it was just that validation that we needed. It was the endorsement that really drove the business forward.
Do you have any advice or any thoughts for startups who aren't even to the point or big enough to look for large national, like that sort of things? Are there other, just what to look for in a good partnership in general, the ones that you can make or the opportunities you do have versus ones that won't work as well?
Yeah, the business environment today is different than it's ever been. I actually think it's easier to have good partnership associations than it's ever been because especially, I'm just going to talk retail for a moment. Retail is under tremendous pressure, as we all know. And so the retailers, the biggest in the world, are saying, bring me something new, something different that will encourage people to come into my store and engage with us. So if you have something that you want to sell ultimately at retail, you know, brick and mortar retail besides online, it's that what's unique, what's different, why should I allow you to have space in my store kind of thing if you can solve that. Same thing's true in a service industry or any other. You know, I was thinking about Daniel's business as he was speaking. I don't know what his distribution go-to-market strategy is. It's a compelling need, but how do you tell that story? How do you get in front of those people? And, you know, maybe, I'm just throwing out a name, if he were to partner up, well, I won't even say a name, but with some of the big HR systems out there today. You have a name? You, I said I want a name. Oh. You know, and they say, hey, by the way, we take care of all these things, but we're not real great on the hiring side, but we know a company that is, and you ought to use them. It's those kind of relationships and affiliate relationships that you can really leverage.
Great. One last question in the back.
Randy, could you tell us a little bit more about how you think about and handle variable compensation? I think it's really hard for companies to not be completely ineffective with that and often counterproductive. And what you said a minute ago about hit your target, get your team gets the bonus, would seem to be maybe counter to what Dan Pink would say or Google with OKRs would say. But I know you have some really well thought out answers and experience there. So tell us a little bit more if you would.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And I think I might have shared this story with you, so it'd be a little redundant. When I first got into Zag, I grabbed our operations team together because I heard we weren't performing very well. And I said, all right, I just want you to answer 3 questions for me. What's our on-time, accurate, and complete shipment numbers? You know, how are we doing there? And they were very honest. They said, we don't know. We've never measured it. I said, okay, fair enough. Why don't you measure it for a month? Come back and let's talk about it. And they came back and they said, okay, we got it. On-time, accurate, and complete is at 62%. Good or bad? Yeah, pretty bad, right? I was pretty impressed they were honest about that too. That's like a flashing neon sign. We are going out of business, okay? 62% on time, accurate, and complete, which means just over half the time as a consumer, you were actually getting your product when you thought you would get it, the whole order, and the right order. That's three opportunities to do poorly, and we only got all 3 right 62% of the time. Okay. So to that team, we said, hey, you know, we think we ought to probably have some goals. You can have 3 or 4 goals as a team as they relate to product, brand, distribution, or operational excellence. They said, well, we're operations. We're going to put a goal on time, accurate, and complete. So they came back in. Remember, if you make 100,000, I'm going to give you another 30,000 for hitting your goals. And I'm not going to set the target. You set your own target. That's where the self-direction comes from. So they came back in. They said, hey, next year, we're going to ship on time, accurate, and complete at 85%. How is that? That's terrible. Remember the flashing neon sign, we're going out of business? We turned the blinker off, but there's still a neon sign that says we're going out of business, okay? But it was the team's goal. So I'm like, okay, it's better than 62. I'll pay you an extra $30,000 to do that, each member of the team, you know, however it worked there. Well, guess what? They went out and they worked on it for a year, and they had to change processes and procedures and supply chain issues, all kinds of things, and they actually got up a little over 90. So next year they came in, they said, guess what? Our new goal is 95%. Now we're starting to get warm, okay? I'm not feeling so bad for paying for the performance. They got in the high 90s. And then the next year they came in and they set it at 99. And it was a progression over about 3 or 4 years to where they became world class. And they'd made a lot of money along the way, filling those wins. So you go back to Dan Pink's philosophy. They had autonomy in their goals. They had mastery as they achieved it. And they had purpose. They were coming in for something bigger than an individual, at least on a team level. And what we did the 4th or 5th year, we said, okay, find a new goal, because that goal or that process had now become culture in the organization. They still perform at a 99.9% rate today. So, and I don't want to leave your brother hanging. So, Bart, you asked about a Henry Kissinger impersonation. The reason he asked, I worked for Henry Kissinger early in my career. Most of you are too young to even know who that is, but he was a great politician and basically ran the country in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And he was a tough son of a gun. So he's heard some of the stories of me getting chewed out in boardrooms. That's what he wants me to share with you. I'm not going to do it.
Okay, last and final question that we ask all of our guests. What is something fun that your success has allowed you to do?
Wow, I think fun for us together, is probably the give back. I think if you really believe that you're here to make the world a little better, that give back's pretty important to us. Lisa touched on it. There's a lot of places, there's a lot of need in society today, and we can't cure everything that ails society. But at the root of a lot of that is a lack of access to education. And so for us, it's allowed us to put a number of scholarships in play and make a huge difference in somebody's life and a little difference in the world. And I think that's really rewarding.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, and we are glad to have you here. Thank you for everything you have shared. Let's give it up one more time.
Thank you.
Stand up. And I'm going to hand you off to Amy.
All right, you guys, thank you so much, Marie. I appreciate that. I'm going to hand this to you. This is a little thank you for, actually, it's a really cool travel bag and some little goodies in there for you guys. I know, perfect timing. Appreciate you being here so much. And Lisa, okay, kudos to this girl, right? I think she can handle this guy over here. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. Thank you. Okay. All right, so I just want to give a couple thanks to everyone that's been a part of today's program. If you were not here for our opening, you missed Benson. Benson was amazing. He came in and he welcomed us with his bagpipes, and it was pretty cool. So Benson, kudos to you, buddy, and what a great talent outside of work that you got to bring in and share with us all today. Thank you, Daniel and Dave. Terrific, valuable insights on hiring the right talent and how to predict that and how to be right and how to measure it. The 5 H's that should play into every part of your culture. Randy and Lisa, you definitely exhibit all 5 of those H's. Very impressive, thank you. Workman, Neidiger, Matt, we really are grateful for your sponsorship today and the lunch that we're about ready to dive into. Central Bank, Chris, Jeff, and Jared, we are super appreciative for this partnership and excited to see where that takes everything. I have one short, quick announcement. I'm going to have Darren come up and share with you guys, but when he's done, we've got just a quick teaser video.
All right. So, once a year, Rev Road does this great conference. It's Revation, the Revation Summit. It's September 19th and 20th. It's all of our portfolio companies, all of our partners, all our sponsors, all our investors. Really, really cool thing, and all their employees and families too. The last session is the Rev Road Rally. We gather over 100 of the coolest people who have mental disabilities with an array of really amazing vehicles of all types. Helicopter, limo, sports cars, vintage, all kinds of stuff. This morning I got a hot air balloon, so that's going to be good. And we gather them in Orem at the park. And all the Rev Road portfolio company employees get to come and act as volunteers to help these great folks have experiences in these vehicles and take pictures. So all of you are invited to that. That would be Friday, September 20th from 2 to 5 p.m. If you or someone you know has a cool vehicle of any kind, we would love to have you get them in touch with us, because the more the merrier. We'll have military vehicles, emergency services, fire trucks, sports cars, cool trucks, all kinds of stuff. So please be sure to reach out to me or Amy or Bart or AJ, or just contact us at info@revroad.com and let us know who's there and who you know. And we're always welcoming sponsors too, because we like to give really cool swag bags to these folks to take home as well. So that's about it. I'll turn it back to you, Amy.
Okay, thanks, Darren. And we'll make sure we get that on our events page on the website, so look for details there. You don't have to remember that. But it's going to be a really amazing event and really fun to pull that off for these individuals and see smiles on their faces. So, all right. Our next review is September 5th. It's always the first Thursday of the month. We only have a couple that we miss during the year for various reasons, but you can usually plan on the first Thursday of every month. So September 5th, we're going to kick that off with a quick little teaser video for our featured founder speaker, and then we'll go to lunch.
Hi, my name's Drew Major. I'm the CTO of Sling TV. In a previous life, I was co-founder of Novell. I'd like to share some insights I gained in facing failure and challenges that help you figure out actually where your true value is and where you can truly innovate. I'm excited to see you on September 5th. We'll talk, answer questions. Appreciate your insights.
Okay, one more thing, really quick. Here at Rev Road, who's been here for our kickoff, or our ending? What do we normally do? We have two things we do. Review. Seth was giving me a quick little evil eye over here. I saw that, Seth. Every Thursday, we have a Rev Up, which is free, and it's open to the public. It's 4 to 5:30. Seth runs a great program. It's a 4-week course, and it basically helps you in your business with the validation, your market fit solution process, and he does a really great job with that. So every Thursday, 4:30 to 5, it's free. Come, participate, and you'll receive some really valuable information and some homework to go home and work on your business, and then you got to come back and report. So it's a great free resource for you entrepreneurs that are trying to make sure there's a market for your service. So, all right, we're going to do our cheer and then go out for lunch, okay? Ready, set, rev. Thank you for coming.